Hey, listen up, y'all. I'm gonna shout out this young gun right here because he's trying to do his thing. Joseph Jaffe, not famous. Probably rightfully so. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm famous because, he not famous. And he like, yo, let me call my famous friends and see if they'll shout me out and make me more famous, sir. Right? But so, Joseph Jaffe, man, it's cool. You got your late night talk show popping off. That's what's dope. Streaming, been doing your thing, man. Started this in March of the 2020, which is, tough throughout the years, but booking great guests, man. Jamal Mashboard, James Rollins, steady building it, man. Keep it popping off, man. Keep building your brand, man. Believe in yourself. Keep going hard, all right? That's what it's all about. One of these days, this little acronym of yours, not famous, is not going to be true. People going to see you in the mall and be like, I know who you is. Them going to be your cousins saying it all incorrect like that. But you know what I'm saying? You know what you going to do. What you going to do? They family. All right, bro. I'll holler.
Joseph Jaffe. I believe that's a Japanese name. And but I tell you what, he's not famous. He's famouser than he was. Or used to was, but fame is fleeting, like a paperweight. It just comes and goes.
I just want you to know that I've practiced this word about 20 times to make sure that I did not mispronounce it.
I have a question. Has anyone ever said with all due respect and then not followed up with a zinger?
His side of the bed. If I come in and I'm on the other side, he will move it. Yeah, that's it.
Which side do you like? With all due respect, you make a good point.
Cheery Oreos! Toasted Oreos!
Mute. He's muted.
I love what he's saying. He doesn't need sounds.
You're so small, squishing your head, Joseph.
You can.
Do it with me, Joe.
With all due respect, you really do look handsome, Bruce. Cheery Oreos! Toasted Oreos!
Look at you. You are insane.
How did I do that?
You're
How did I do
insane.
that? You just made the intro reel. Yes, you did. Well, let me tell you, not only did you make the intro reel, but I have Cedric the Entertainer, and can you believe President George W. Bush introducing me? That's how not famous I really am. But, this show is not about my infamy. Nobody wants to be infamous. This is about the fame of my guest, Erica Keswin, who is... We're going to be having a conversation through retention to loneliness to connection. It is a conversation that is needed now more than ever in the history of business. How's that for a setup? She will not disappoint. So if you like this show and if you love me, and, as I often say, even if you hate me, just feel something, because so often we've numbed ourselves to feeling. But if you love or hate me, you want to make sure that keep me in check, keep me honest, just subscribe, bit.ly/subscribe to the show on YouTube. I will be bigger than Mr. Beast one day, and that day will be millions of years in the future, but it doesn't stop me. It doesn't stop me from doing the Collective Cafe Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is the highlight of my day. It could be the highlight of yours. Just come on into discord.gg/Alpha Collective. Just over the last few weeks, I discussed the Frankenstein factor, or the Frankenstein effect, where entrepreneurs are always cobbling together various courses, ideas, books, themes, frameworks, and often we end up with a duct tape and chicken wire type of approach. And this is why business needs one operating system. Also, we've been doing this is what's known as the Hamburger Method, relating to current happiness and future happiness. The whole idea of the hamburger, or not hamburger helper, is that we want something that tastes good and is good. Tastes good meaning hedonistic pleasure, and is good, meaning purposeful future as well, present and future state. It is something that can be achieved, and it is something that needs to be achieved. If you can't make it live, we actually have a podcast version. How about that? bit.ly/collective cafe to go, where you can make sure that you don't miss a single episode. And in fact, this week, which of course, it could be any week, but the week that you're watching this, let's just assume this week, we did an episode on this whole idea of this, what I call the severance issue, right? You can't check your work at the door when you go home. You can't check home at the door when you go to work, especially when you're working from home. So how do you compartmentalize? How do you create division, but also fusion and harmony between these two seemingly disparate worlds? Well, now it's time for our seated soliloquy, and obviously always connected to my guest. This one is called A Loneliness. Now, this is actually something that was an entire episode of the Collective Cafe, or session in our virtual coffee shop. And you know, what I really spoke about is this idea that, look, we are suffering right now more than ever as a people, as a species, as humankind. We are seemingly more disconnected than ever before, with the irony, of course, meaning that we've never been as connected and yet so alone. And I actually spoke about this idea that I personally, I love being alone. I love being by myself. First of all, I talk to myself a lot, and I do understand that I'm on the continuum of madness, because often I'll respond, and I always laugh at my own jokes. I'm hilarious at the best of times. But seriously, every morning when you look yourself in the mirror, what do you see? Who do you see? Do you love the person staring back at you? Are you able to find some solace in the solitude? Because increasingly so today, we need to become really comfortable with ourselves. And I guess if you can't love yourself, if you can't figure out how to love yourself, how are you going to love someone else? But there is a little bit of a silver lining here, because you don't have to be alone. Whether you love being alone, as opposed to loneliness, nobody wants that. A little bit of a loneliness is okay too. But we have each other. We still have asynchronous intimacy. We still have the power of community. Just reach out and touch someone. Maybe not literally, or at least get their permission first. But the idea is just go out and check in on someone, see that they're doing okay. Be surprised. You really would be surprised how many people need that little check-in. Don't be afraid to be pushy. Be just a little bit rude, because ultimately, if your heart is pure and if your intentions are pure, you might just make the difference in someone's life, the kind of difference that could even be during these sometimes dark and turbulent times, the difference between life and death. And now let's talk about life, and not a loneliness, but liveliness or livelihood. Let's talk about Erica Keswin, my guest today. Erica Keswin is a workplace strategist and best-selling author of books including Bring Your Human to Work, love that, Rituals Roadmap, and her newest, The Retention Revolution, 7 surprising and very human ways to keep employees connected to your company, a book that sets leaders up for success in this new world of work. She's been featured on Good Morning America, MSNBC, and Live with Kelly and Ryan, and in numerous print and digital articles. When Erica isn't writing books and offering keynotes, she coaches top-of-the-class businesses, organizations, and individuals to help them improve their performance by honoring relationships. I love that phrase as well in today's hybrid workplace. Let's welcome her to the show. Erica, welcome to Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous, because
All right. Let's see, I'm getting in the middle of the screen. How you doing?
Yeah, you know, because I can change it a little bit like that. Now you're
There we go.
you have greenery outside. We all need a bit of greenery.
Well, I'm at a New York apartment. I was recording a podcast the other day, and they were washing the windows. You never know who might start to climb up the building.
I still love the fact that, you know, my daughter, who was born in the city, to this day, nothing phases her. All those garbage trucks that would clean, you know, up on 69th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue at like 5 in the morning. And we were awake, but she just slept like an absolute baby. So
Yeah, you just get used to it.
a little bit of sensitivity as well. So, Erica, we are going to talk. I really, you know, I like to hype my guests, but in your particular case, I think the things that you talk about and the things that you practice and preach and help, now more than ever, we need them. But, you know, before we get into time, I think we have to do a little bit of ridiculous. And so, are you ready to play Two Truths and a Lie?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I'm going to bring in my AI singers, and this is what they came up with for me.
Two truths and a lie, can you guess which is which?
Scarily written by AI.
Tune and lean and don't you dare miss a pitch.
And performed by AI, including backing
It's
tracks.
Joseph Jaffe, not famous, but you'll see. We twist, we turn.
All right, we're
in search
going
of
to
reality.
twist and we're going to turn reality. Erica, this is an opportunity where we get to know you, and maybe people close to you wouldn't even know some of these facts. Of course, one of them is a lie, but which one is it? Is it the fact that you, and this is interesting, that you occasionally moonlight as an amateur stand-up comedian? You've performed at local comedy clubs and you use humor to bring a fresh perspective to your keynotes. When did you get involved in stand-up comedy?
Maybe about 6 or 7 years ago.
And you know, so can you teach me how to be funny? My wife tells me, you know, that she fell in love with me based on the fact that I was funny, but now not so much.
I don't know if I could teach someone how to be funny, but I think it's, you know, following what's going on in the news and trying to come up with things that people can just relate to in the most basic sense.
And you know what? It's you know, the one thing that I've had so many people on the show. No one wants to see an enlarged head of mine. So many people on the show, and it's amazing how many business leaders and also keynote speakers have gone and studied improv and stand-up comedy in terms of being more spontaneous, in terms of being quicker on their feet. In general, how do you stay fresh? How do you stay alert? How do you stay on your toes when delivering a keynote, whether using humor or not?
Yeah, I think it's really knowing the audience and really knowing your material, you know, whether that's comedy or a keynote. And I think when you know it that well, you're also then able to be flexible. If somebody asks a question, you can zig and you can zag. If someone throws out something from the audience, you know, you can think on your feet and incorporate it. So, you know, one of my husband's favorite quotes is chance favors the prepared mind. So I think preparation for me is key in both areas.
The more I practice, the luckier I get. Well, I've never met Chance, or as I would say in South Africa, Chance. Seems like a great person. But yeah, preparedness as well. I mean, look, I'll let people in on a little bit of a secret, which is I always, when I used to keynote, which was like until March 2020, gee, I wonder what happened then. You know, I always used to say, I really don't know what the hell is going to come out of my mouth. And that was always 50% true. And because there were some things that just came out so naturally, but they were just, it was something that I'd done 1,000 times that I could execute without even thinking. But then the other 50% of the time, I really had no idea what was coming out of my mouth. Which is probably why they didn't ask me back. But anyway.
Yeah.
But that was me. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about the fact that according to our researchers, you are a Real Madrid fan. So you know all about Hala Madrid, do you not?
Yeah. So when my son was gosh, in 6th grade, we called an audible and decided to move to Madrid. And he went to school there, and my girls couldn't. They were applying to high school, so we sort of went back and forth. But we're big sports fans in our family, and my husband's really involved in USA Soccer. I do a lot of work for the U.S. Olympic Committee, and so living in Spain, you got to become. We were living in Madrid. You got to become a Real Madrid fan.
Well, you don't have to. You could also become an Atletico Madrid fan, but they're the arch enemies, are they not?
Yes, they are. And then there's a lot of people in Madrid. I mean, people love Barcelona. There's a lot of different teams, but we spent a lot of time in Bernabeu Stadium, and really have just become Real Madrid fans.
Now, if you believe that you are figuring out, and there's one more coming, which one is the lie and which two are the truths, all you have to do is go to bit.ly/2T1L, as in 2 truths, 1 lie, _ Erica Keswin. I keep on seeing the word cake in there, which I'm sure is I'm not the first person. And Eric can swim, and Eric cake swim. There's lots of stuff going on. I don't know. It's a phrase that has multiple meanings.
Yes.
Have you got that a lot, by the way, the word cake?
No, you're the first person.
I don't know. I just see cake the whole time. But then again, I see dead people. So anyway, I'll tell you, by the way, I took my son. It was a kind of a delayed gift for him for his bar mitzvah. We went to Barcelona, and we actually saw El Clasico. Saw it was unbelievable. We saw Sergio Ramos scoring the winner in the 90th minute, almost in front of us. We were behind the goalposts, and it was just, I'll never forget the experience. It was just this groan, in Camp Nou Stadium. But it was, everyone in their lives has to be able to see El Clasico. That's for sure.
Well, for the listeners who don't know what that is, it's when Barcelona plays Madrid.
Oh, so now you might have given a hint as to which one the truth is, or maybe you're just that good a liar that you had that one in reserve. Exactly. Well, here's the third one, and this is an interesting one. Erica, you are apparently a part-time matchmaker, and you've set up 3 marriages. From what I understand, if you actually set up 3 marriages, it is a direct ticket to go to heaven. So you are an angel, I guess, of sorts.
I am an angel. Yes. I describe myself as a professional dot connector, whether that is seeing the themes and ideas in the workplace and also in personal lives. And so, yeah, I've set up a bunch of marriages, which, to your point, I have a straight ticket to heaven, and I'd still love to set more up, but I have filled my quota.
Again, if you think that you know which one of those 3, was it the stand-up comedian, was it the Real Madrid fan, or being a part-time matchmaker, just go to bit.ly/2T1L_. I can't see it properly now. Erica Keswin. I'm just seeing cake the whole time. And vote, and you might even get something special in return. Erica, there's so much innovation in life, and I hear the ads all the time for it. I'm not in the market, but there is a service called It's Just Lunch, which I'm sure you've heard the ads for.
Yep.
I just think, what a brilliant idea, actually, being able to reduce the risk associated, with dating and creating this safer environment, or maybe lower risk environment. I suppose, being a workplace strategist, how do those two worlds connect? This idea of finding and looking for love in all the right or wrong places, workplace romances. What advice would you give to people that are trying to find connection and really just sick and tired of just swiping left and right?
Yeah. It's funny that you asked that, because I was thinking just this weekend or last weekend about writing this article, because, always see these days is the clickbait of this company is making people go back to the office and trying to golden handcuff people to the desk. And I want to flip the narrative, and I want to start to talk about what is the human case for going back to the office. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back to the office 5 days a week. I love the fact that I think those days for the most part are over. I love the idea about flexibility. I liked it before the pandemic. I think that this idea of being human at work is, if you need to do something, get your work done, but also take care of what you need to do. That being said, I was thinking to myself, like, what are the reasons? What are the human reasons to go into an office? One is, there's a study out of Harvard. It's the longest study ever done, longest longitudinal study ever done for 75 years at Harvard, where they found that the thing most correlated with a life well lived and satisfaction and happiness is the depth of your relationships. And if we agree with that, I mean, it's again one of the most well-known studies that there is. I also think that, if we're not going into an office, and if people are at home and not leaving their house, and they've gotten into this habit, and at the same time we have the Surgeon General of the United States saying we're in a loneliness epidemic, I don't see why people, as I said, I am a dot connector. Why are we not talking about the fact that maybe people aren't having issues around deepening relationships and loneliness at work when they're not leaving their house? And so to me, that's one of the reasons, right? If you want a life well lived, you need to deepen your relationships. Number two, there's another well-known study out of Gallup that found that the people that are most engaged at work have a best friend at work. So if you're at a company where, I'm going in on Monday and Wednesday, and Joseph's going in on Tuesday and Thursday, and we never even see each other, how do you make relationships at work? And the third is again, I was just thinking about this, is the dating piece, that so many people hate this online dating and the swiping. But we're not in many places today. I mean, a lot of people met people at work. I'm not talking about going and having a relationship with your boss that you shouldn't be having, but it is one of the few places where you can naturally and organically meet people. And I just think over time, it's just going to be harder and harder to organically build relationships.
I was listening to Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, and I forget the guest, but the conversation was about loneliness and was about connection and stress and happiness. And I remember the statistic, which is that, first of all, physiologically now, loneliness has the impact on longevity equivalent to smoking half a pack of cigarettes a day.
Yep.
So, and then I remember the stat about having a best friend at work, that actually having a best friend at work actually was it correlated with longevity or just happiness or both?
It might be both, but the stuff I've read is more about you're just more engaged and you're more satisfied at work, which is why, if you're a manager and a leader, you talk about the importance of curating connection. And from a company perspective, you're less likely to leave when you have connections at work. I mean, there's always going to be a company that can pay you more. But when you think about the reasons why people stay, it's because of the culture and because of the people and because of the relationships. But if as a company, we're not being very thoughtful and intentional about how, when, where, why we do gather and come together, it will have a negative impact on the bottom line.
I want to stick around for a moment on this idea of making the human case, because I've never heard it expressed that way. I always find a quote for my guest, and today's quote comes from Robin Sharma, and this is the quote. The quote is, "The business of business is relationships. The business of life is human connection." I think this plays into this idea that, when you look and you're like, wait a second, sneaky Sharma, relationships and connection, that's kind of the same thing. Yeah. I guess what he's trying to say is that the business of everything is connected to relationships and connection within that. and they're not necessarily, separated. But how do you interpret that quote?
Well, and I think, funny when you said that, I was actually thinking the same thing. But when, here we are in 2023, when the work and life is ever more integrated and connected anyway, I would say back in the day, there was this potential bifurcation between the two. And now it is, it is so intertwined, for better or for worse. So I think connection, relationships, life, business, it's all sort of like stirred up together in a soup.
There's no doubt, and this is what we were discussing in the green room earlier, that it's really hard right now. Actually, in my new book, I actually talk about. I start off by saying, I should have spent more time in the office, said no one ever, and then I disagree, and I strongly disagree with that. I say, actually, we should be getting to a point where we wish we would have spent more time, in the office or at work, because of the fulfillment it gave us. But of course, the sting in the tail is, these days, work is maybe like, I don't know, 5 feet away from your bedroom. So you should have definitely wanted to spend more time, at the office. But it is that severance, that's that show Severance on Apple TV. It's speaking to something that is an inconvenient truth, isn't it?
Well, when you say, I would, who wants to spend more time in the office, it also depends on the office. There are offices that are that have very toxic cultures. There are offices where you walk in and you can feel the energy. So to me, it's about finding that sweet spot that when you come into the office, especially after the pandemic, one of the most important things is, well, here's what we don't want. You're in Connecticut right now. I'm in New York City. So we're all you and I are in the tri-state area. And here's what we don't want. We don't want people commuting in to New York City, let's say, and only half their team is there, and they could be doing the exact same kind of work they could be doing from Connecticut. And so the idea about, for the people that say, wow, I enjoy going into the office, it's these offices where the time spent in the office is designed around actual connection. Who wants to commute in, and you're in your corner, I'm in my corner, and we're both on a screen and we're still on Zoom, or we're just doing things that we didn't need to take a 90-minute train ride to do. And so when we think about, and that's also not a way to build relationships at work. It's a waste to commute in for that. So I think the companies that seem to get it in this moment are being very intentional. They are designing days in the office that are worth the commute. They are realizing that doing what we are doing now, talking, building relationships, is actually part of the work. That it's not just sort of you do this after the work gets done. Because again, when we think about this in the context of retention, when you build relationships at work, you are less likely to leave. And so that if we're not intentional, you almost have the worst of both worlds. You have people mad at you for commuting for quote unquote nothing, and you're not getting the return on that investment of when people actually are together. Have them do a volunteer day, have them do a big exercise with a whiteboard to, innovate and iterate and, collaborate. Although collaborate actually is a different one, because there's a lot of great technologies now that enable us to collaborate. So it's almost like the stakes are even a little higher. You got to do something more than just collaborate.
I want to just give you the first air horn of the episode, because I cannot underscore how much I love the statement, designing days worth the commute.
Yep.
You nailed it. That is, if people are watching, that is a $1 million quote. Pay Erica her $1 million. I rail against the commute. I do rail against the big commute, but certainly I wrote about it as well, which is I was talking to a couple. He is 94. She is 86. And I was telling them about the whole thesis about the book. And I asked him about his commute. And he said for 35 years, he spent 4 hours a day commuting into the city. And as he said that, I could see there were tears welling up in his eyes, and I could see the regret on his face. What a waste. What a waste to be able to take 4 hours, or 2 hours, or even 1 hour a day. And then of course, March 2020, I think we had an opportunity to rethink. And so the railing that I have is the anger that I have is to companies that are demanding people to come back to the office, but they're not designing days worth the commute. They need to hire you, Erica. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, it's spot on. So,
well, thank you. I mean, people will say to me, well, what's the perfect number of days? And my response to that is there really is no perfect number of days, because when you design, or develop a strategy of again, how, when, where people come back to the office, it depends on where, do your people even live? Are they even co-located near an office? I have a company that came up with a return to office strategy in the beginning of September and said, okay, everybody, we are coming back 3 days a week. And then they looked around after, of course, they had communicated it and said, whoops, 20 or 25% of our people are COVID migrants and moved during the pandemic. And so what ended up happening was, if you have 25% of your people that aren't there, you have the 75% of the people that are mad and frustrated that they, quote unquote, have to come in, and the other 25% don't. And then you have the 25% that are feeling increasingly left out and disconnected. So it really is a lose-lose. And so I've seen companies that are, I just kicked off an event a couple of weeks ago for Microsoft. They have this one team of 250 people, and they get together for a full week twice a year, once in the fall, once in the spring. They do plenty of other things during the year by team. The people that are near Seattle will go in, but they really try to think about this in an inclusive way. And the data shows that if you spend an extended period with someone, getting to know them in real life, and we all know this, is that the tone and the tenor of how you begin to communicate via technology changes once you've had time in person with someone. And so it's, again, less about the exact number of days, but it's the why, and it's the intentionality around it.
I got a couple of builds on that as well. One of the things I've started this year coaching a system called EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And one of the things that EOS does, which I realize now in talking to you, is at the beginning of what they call the L10, the level 10 meeting, there is just called a segue, and it's a 5-minute segue. They say it's designed to move people from working in the business to working on the business, but it always involves a personal and a professional piece of good news. And part of it is that we actually don't know what's going on in each other's lives. Hell, many families actually don't even know what's going on in each other's lives. And so if that that happens at home, it sure as hell going to happen at the office. So it's a small thing that I think that can make a huge difference. The other thing is, so I wanted to kind of lob it back to you, is if you are designing a day's worth of commute in the office, I see an opportunity as well for companies to design also what an optimal stay-at-home day would look like. I see my daughter who's just started working, and it must be hard, especially when you are starting your career, to not know how to manage yourself or structure yourself short of being proctored by a big brother at the office. So what are your thoughts about the optimal at-home day?
I think it depends on the role, and it depends on the work. For many of us, like if you're in the kind of role where you're doing certain tasks that are heads down, that require just a lot of deep thinking and no interruptions and spreadsheets and analytics or reading. I mean, it depends on the role, but the goal is when you map out your week, if you have certain days in the office, again, like it's hard as a young person, to design that. It really often comes from your manager, ideally. If it doesn't, and you're home and you need to figure it out, what I would suggest is to say, look, when you're in the office, you need to build relationships. I mean, going back to where we started this conversation. So if you're a young person and you're in the office on Tuesday and Thursday, let's say you have a daughter, I have two daughters, and there's a women's employee resource group, and you check in on that, or that's when you schedule your one-on-one with your manager. That's when you go out to lunch or have lunch with a couple of colleagues your age that maybe started when you started. And look, this is really hard, especially for people that are shy and introverted. I mean, this is not easy, which is why leaders, this is their job. I mean, they need to really focus on helping people map this out. So that those would be the in-office days, and try to limit just constant meeting after meeting after meeting. And at home, it depends on also your style, which is where the flexibility comes in. I do my best deep thinking in the morning. If it were me, I'd get up, I would shut off every bit of technology and do my writing. And this is what I do anyway, my deep thinking. For some younger people, they'd rather do it later in the day. I also think when you're home, it's really important to build in breaks. And I wrote a book on rituals. So there's a whole chapter in there about the rituals of taking breaks. There's a woman from Facebook who shared that she takes it's called, one of her rituals is 20 by 20 by 20. Every 20 minutes, she takes a 20-second break, 20 feet from her computer to get up and to move. I'd also suggest people check out, there's a book called The Energy Project by Tony Schwartz, who talks about there's a cadence around every 90 minutes. And if you take a break every 90 minutes, that is how you maintain your maximum level of energy throughout the day. And I'm sure many people have heard that, if you take a nap and you take a nap for 90 minutes, you feel great. You take a nap for 2 hours, you feel exhausted. It's like too long of a nap. So I'm not an expert in that, but this book called The Energy Project really there is some magic to this 90-minute number. So I think when you're designing your day at home, it's setting those goals, making sure you take breaks. And what a lot of companies are saying as well is that this is an opportunity for work-life integration that as a Gen Xer, like I never had. So the hope is if you're, have young kids, and if you're home on a Friday, use the opportunity to take them to school, use the opportunity at home to go to your favorite exercise class. What I tell companies along these lines is, and this is really for all of us, we need to rethink the way we're measuring performance, which is easier in some jobs than others. Because the days of FaceTime are kind of over, if we're not bumping into people in the office, all of these things work better. Everything that we've talked about so far work better when you are measuring outcomes at work versus, sitting in the office, pushing your pencil.
Well, you said so. I almost gave you another air horn there as well, because there's so many elements there. First of all, I love the phrase work-life integration as opposed to work-life balance.
Yeah.
I think that's an important, it's not even a nuance. It actually hits you over the head. The other thing is, I also learned a little bit about through becoming a talk show host, which was very unexpected for me, but about the Pomodoro effect.
Yeah.
So there are many of these techniques that can work. Now, you spoke about a book, but you've written, this is when I like to kind of paint the whole world red and white and yellow and green and just celebrate the book. The book is called, in fact, I've even got more for you, Erica. Let's give you a little, we'll give you, like, you're sponsoring the show at the bottom, at the top now, you can see. The book is called, I love this. This is my passion. This is not something that I studied, but I just fell into this when I wrote Flip the Funnel. Retention is the new acquisition. with respect to customers, but certainly with respect to employees, because without employees, you have no customers. The book is called The Retention Revolution: 7 Surprising and Very Human Ways to Keep Employees Connected to your company. So inherent in that line is the key, which is if you want to keep them, you've got to create connection with them and allow them to connect with each other.
And I would just add, the other piece to this is not just, and one of the other things I think about a lot, and it sounds like we have kids, close in age, people in general are living longer, they're working longer. And in many companies, we have up to 5 generations of people working under one roof. And what many young Gen Zers want, and I also think older people want it and got a taste of it during the pandemic, which maybe they hadn't before, is they want to feel connected to purpose. They want to feel like they're making an impact. And so when I think about a real key to retention, again, clients, customers, and employees, the earlier you can connect them to your values. This is totally cheesy, but getting your values off the walls and into the halls, right? Physical or even your Zoom halls. We've got to bring them to life, because this generation, that is so critical to them, even more than compensation. So that's why in this book, the word that's the most important, probably even more important than retention, which is sort of weird because it's in big letters, is the word connected. That we need to connect with employees early and often. Onboarding cannot take place for only one day. And we need to keep connecting with them. We need to keep onboarding and re-onboarding. And the last thing you want to do is to be connecting with someone the day they tell you that they're leaving. It's too late at that point.
I love this idea of it's almost like renewing your vows.
Yes. 100%.
So re-onboarding, it never stops. To prove to you that I get your emails and I even read them. You wrote, and this is obviously, recognizing the current times in which we're living, but you spoke about a client, I think, or a leader that you had consulted with, that created this concept called time to connect in her offices, and how she uses that. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because it was definitely resonant, relevant, and important in today's times.
So her name is Judith Harrison, and she's the Chief Diversity Officer at a company called Weber Shandwick. And what's funny is about a year and a half ago, I heard her speak at a conference, and I stalked her. I just went up afterwards and I said, you were amazing. I'd love to introduce myself. And again, like, I wrote this retention book, just came out, September 23. So now, very recently. And I told her about that book that was going to be written, and then my other book about rituals. And I said, Judith, when you talk about time to connect, it sounds like this has become a really important company ritual. And she hadn't really thought about it in those terms. And so what she did was, after George Floyd was murdered and everyone was reeling, she brought people together to talk about the issues, to talk about how they were feeling. And she ended up calling it Time to Connect. And it is very, very intentional, the way that she does it. So she did it after George Floyd. She did another one after the Highland Park shootings and Uvalde. And she did one last year on anti-Semitism. And then, given what's going on in the Middle East, just did one about the terror attacks in Israel literally a couple days ago. So, but what she does is she opens up the conversation, where she writes something and she reads it. So she collects a lot of information and kind of shares the situation of what's going on. Sometimes she'll share what the company itself is doing in support of whatever the issue is. But what I love is that she has one line in there before she opens it up to the group. And she says, so what my question for you all is, how are you doing? And it's showing, and oftentimes in her remarks, she's really bringing her humanity, her own vulnerability to these issues. And last week when she did one, 327 people came. to talk about what was going on in the Middle East. She, these things are emotional, they get heated. There are ground rules. She a couple times had to interrupt and say, look, we're keeping the politics out of this, but we are here for each other to connect. And, when I asked her about what she thought, well, what is the ROI, of doing this from a business perspective? She said that the numbers speak for themselves. Hundreds and hundreds of people come to this thing every single week, and they feel heard and they thank her. There was a woman that during the Highland Park shooting, that when Judith did her intro and said, I want to ask you how you're doing, she raised, some people raise their hands and speak on this, Zoom. Others just use the chat function. But this more senior person living in Chicago, she's like, look, I am not okay. I am not okay. And there's a big human piece for this, which I would hope listeners see as sort of, somewhat obvious, connecting as humans. But the business piece, when Judith was telling me the story, about the woman in Highland Park, the business piece for this is, if Joseph, you and I are on a call together and you say, you know what, I am not okay. I have things going on, whether it's with a big thing like Highland Park or what's going on right now in Israel, or really anything in your life. And you and I are working on a team together, and I email you and we have a deadline and I'm like getting frustrated. If I know you more as a person or know what's going on in your life, I am going to give you a little bit more grace. And that ends up being better for the business, in terms of our working relationship. And if I'm a manager and I hear you say that you are not okay, I am then able to call you and say, what can I do to support you? I'll say one more thing on this. A lot of my work in general is inspired by a study out of Cornell University, where a professor was studying team performance. What makes one team higher performing than another team? And Kevin Niffen was the professor, and his dad was a firefighter. And so he grew up hanging out with the firefighters, mostly the guys in the firehouse. Long story short, what he found when he was doing his research was that the firefighters who are the most dedicated to the ritual of the firehouse meal, sitting around the table, connecting as humans, shooting the breeze, they saved more lives. Literally, the science backed it up, so that there was this correlation between connection and performance. So I wanted to throw that example in here at the end with this example of Time to Connect. Time to Connect is an amazing thing that they do at the company. It happens to be virtual, and I think you can find opportunities to connect both in person or virtually if you do it well. But this example of the firefighters reminded me to link back to where you started this conversation, which is, when you do come into the office, make sure that you create time to connect, because, it is good for you as a human, and it also is good for business.
The blueprint is weaved throughout this episode, because it goes back to the creation of rituals, the ability to be intentional. And it's funny because I've been noodling on this idea, which I want to share with you on the episode. So about a year and a half, almost a year and a half ago, I started this collective cafe, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. And I haven't missed one, unless I'm traveling or literally not able to make it. And so I came up with a bold prediction. And this is one honestly, Erica, I've been right with everything I've predicted when it comes to marketing and media. But when it comes to this one, I really hope I'm right. I'm not sure I will be, even though I think I am, which is this idea of every business should start off. And my prediction is, hopefully, this is more of a prayer, that they should start off 8 to 9 a.m. every weekday or workday morning with a virtual coffee. And not on video, because some people are on the treadmill and getting the kids ready for school and commuting and walking the dog and multitasking. But audio first in this day and age of whether it's Twitter Spaces or, Clubhouse, etc. An audio first connection with an editorial calendar, with moderators, whether it's manifestation, whether it's live book reads. What I do, and I just want to give this out to the world. Monday we call it manifestation and motivation. Tuesdays, thought leadership Tuesdays. Wellness Wednesdays. Thursdays are live book reads, and Fridays are just open mic and AMAs, etc. I think this is part of what I hear you saying, which is create the ritual, spend time connecting. Maybe it's not an hour for you, maybe it's 15 minutes, but that's how we get to know each other and learn about each other.
Well, I love that. And I'm sure for many people that participate in these collectives, it has become a ritual for them. One of the things I said in the rituals book is beginnings and endings are what I call prime rituals real estate. So the beginning and ending of a day, the beginning and ending of a week, the beginning and ending of a meeting. These are real opportunities to grab for connection. So at Eileen Fisher, the clothing company, before every meeting, they ring a chime, right? To get rid of the noise on the outside, to be more present on the inside. At some of the groups in Toyota, they share a safety moment. The company is all about safety, and let's come together around a moment or a story. It's always amazing to share stories. One of the examples I have in the Retention Revolution is, the importance of checking in. And there's a chapter about being a human professional. And one of the things that we saw during the pandemic was that it's kind of, in a sense, was obviously very different from 9/11 and even what we're experiencing right now, being in New York City and all the protests. There's so much going on right now. It's very heightened. But there are a few times when, 9/11 and the pandemic, March of 2020, people were really checking in with each other and saying, how are you really, really doing? And people would say to me, in the beginning of the pandemic, wow, we would spend 60 minutes of a 60-minute meeting checking in. And about a year out, maybe 30 minutes of a 60-minute meeting checking in. And then they say to me now, well, do I need to keep checking in? And the answer is yes, for a variety of reasons. One, again, this new generation, they want their leaders and managers and colleagues to know them as whole people. And you can't do that without actually having conversations and getting to know them. Number two, the rest of us that are not Gen Z, many of us saw a very different side of leaders. And part of it was they didn't have a choice, right? You're on video, your kids are home from school in the background, you're taking care of elderly parents. My mom passed away in April of 2020. I couldn't really fake, what was going on in my life. And it's almost like, with the Wizard of Oz, right? There is no curtain. Everybody saw what was going on behind the curtain and people liked it. And the leaders who were more human, they were like, wow, they saw their employee engagement go up, their satisfaction go up. And so you're right. It does not have to be an hour, but we do need to check in. And there's one, I'll sort of bring a little levity because this all sounds so down in the, depressing, but there's an example in the book about a check-in that a company does called Pick Your Nick. And what they do, it was started, very randomly by actually her name also happens to be Erica Green. She's no longer at this company, Mural, but they show this image of nine pictures of Nicolas Cage. They're all represent Nicolas Cage in a different movie. And above his face are a bunch of words: stressed, carefree, happy, meh. One says bees. And everybody goes around in the beginning of their meeting and picks their nick and basically describes how they are showing up that day. Now, the goal is not to stop the presses and say, okay, Joseph, why are you meh? But I then know, again, if you and I are working together, there might be something going on. And if I'm your manager, I sure as heck hope the manager would then call to find out what's really, really going on.
Pick your Nick. I thought it was going to be Pick Your Nick, your favorite Nick Cage movie. We all have one, even if we don't want to admit it.
Exactly.
So you talk about in the time where, I'll tell you, I've had a lot of guests on the show and they promote their book, and they do their best to promote the book. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd buy the book based on them coming on, but this one's a no-brainer. So I don't even need to get into these 7, but this is one that I did see that I just wanted you to talk about very briefly, because I think, again, it comes back to now the flip on the flip, which is this idea of how do you optimize the at-home experience? So the old way of thinking is people are only working when you can see them, spy on them, whatever.
Yeah.
The new way is that autonomy and flexibility make work work. So I would just love for you to chat a little bit about what are some of the ways. I mean, we've spoken about what do you do when you're the 22-year-old, starting out at home. How do you motivate yourself? How do you keep yourself active? What do you do now if you're an old school? Maybe you are the old, short, bald, white guy behind the curtain. How do you now, as a manager trying to stay relevant, trust and create this kind of new reality where autonomy and flexibility make work work?
Yeah. Well, first, you're going to wake up when half your team leaves if you don't address some of it. So I'll share one other kind of funny thing. So in the beginning of the pandemic, overnight, most, if almost went home, the knowledge workers went home. And again, this is not talking about frontline workers that still had to show up at work every day. But for the point of this story, the knowledge workers went home, and the managers didn't know what to do with themselves. They're like, how do I know if Joseph is working? I can't see him. How do I measure his performance? How do I monitor his performance? And I don't know if you know what a mouse jiggler is, but what many companies did at the time was they put tracking in the software to track keystrokes and to track the mouse moving. And they thought, well, okay, if Joseph's keys are moving or his mouse is moving, he must be working, right? Well, wrong. Because then what people did, because people are smart, and where there's a will, there's a way, you could go online and Google mouse jiggler, and you get this thing that you stick on your computer, and it moves your mouse. And you literally could be walking your dog or be at Pilates and your mouse is moving. And so it caused us to have to rethink, again, everything we know about work. Because if you're only counting presenteeism, and if you're only measuring my keystrokes, I could be filling out my kids' camp forms. Like, you don't know what I'm doing. And so I think that woke up many people. Were like, oh, wow, they're going to rejigger the system. So I really need, if I want to know my people are working, I got to think about this differently. So it was that, combined with people that had those bosses that you described, were like, I am out of here. And that was the huge part of the Great Resignation. People had more time at home to think about what motivated them and what was purposeful for them, and wanted leaders who thought differently about flexibility. So that chapter in the book, the way that I urge people listening to think about flexibility is what I call acing flexibility, ACE. First, we need to think about flexibility through the lens of autonomy and agency. Everybody, regardless of your job, would want a little bit of agency over their schedule, over their life. Like, who wouldn't? And what was so cool and interesting about this time was that many companies and many roles that you would never think could be done remotely, even a little bit, now they've rethought that. So I'll give you one example. You walk into a store, you walk into Neiman Marcus, and there's a sales associate and you need some clothes. In a million years, I never would have thought a sales associate could work part-time at home. And the answer is, actually, where there's a will, there's a way. Now, can a sales associate work 4 days a week from home? No. But a sales associate at a place like Neiman Marcus has to spend a couple hours a week emailing and texting with clients to make appointments. That person needs to put all the new fashions on their Instagram. That person needs, if you have a very fancy client, you're designing outfits and figuring out what they're going to wear, for the Grammys or the Emmys or whatever it may be. So that person could work at home, maybe 4 hours a week. And for that person, that little bit of agency or autonomy goes a long, long way. And so I would urge you to try to move away from this, you're only working when I can see you, and to say, let's peel back the onion on the job. What things can be done from home, and try to give people a little agency or autonomy. The second part of ACE we've really talked about a lot today, which is designing for connection, making sure that we, have designing days in the office that's worth the commute. Because if you don't, the phrase that I also like to use is that you end up with a recipe for resentment. People are pissed, and I would be pissed too. I mean, right? You hate your commute. And the last, though, is looking at flexibility through the lens of equity. Everything is not going to be equal all the time. That's just not realistic, and jobs are different. But we do need to think about equity. We do need to think about, if we have flexible work and we do some analysis and we find out, this is interesting. All of the women actually have been taking advantage of the flexibility, but the men, have been coming into the office. Well, what might that do when we look 5 years from now, because proximity bias is real? And so maybe we need to rethink how we give out projects, instead of just bumping into somebody, by the bathroom or at the water cooler and say, "Oh, Joseph, great to see you today. Here's a cool new project." So this stuff is not easy, but I try to provide frameworks from which people can at least begin to, address it in a strategic way.
Well, if you want to connect with Erica on X or Instagram, you can do that. She is also on this new business-to-business platform. Maybe you've heard of it, called LinkedIn. But the very first thing you should do after watching this moment is go and buy The Retention Revolution: 7 Surprising and Very Human Ways to Keep Employees Connected to Your Company.
I had one. I was seeing if I had one here, I would hold it up, but I don't seem to have one.
Well, you know what? I'll hold it up. I'll hold it up. I'll hold it up for you. I have a ritual as well. I start the show off, of course, with a little bit of self-deprecation or deprecation about how not famous I am. But I also end the show with a little ritual as well. It began with a bit of a lark. And then one day I forgot to do this for one of my guests. And my mother-in-law in Israel actually reached out to me, and she said, why was this particular person not Chuck Norris approved? So Erica,
You are Chuck Norris approved.
Yes.
You are Chuck Norris approved. And from that moment on, everyone became Chuck Norris approved. It was a pleasure to spend time with you today, and keep on doing the good work, making sure right now that talent is appreciated, that time is savored and respected, and that people have meaning and purpose and connection in their lives. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing, with your host, multiple author and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.